Welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. Matt, how are you today?
Oh, I feel good. I feel good. I've just had a good session, but I've just seen how I look. I don't look good. I look like a man who struggled to sleep last night.
Oh man, we're not going to devolve into sleep chat. I don't think. Not
No,
straight.
we're not.
With two kids, so yeah, I've got the advantage. Got the odds.
How are you?
Yeah, good. So today we've got 3 topics we're going to talk about. You happy just to dive straight in?
Yeah, I think so. Why not? Let's dive in. And you were very gracious and let me speak a lot last time, so it'd be nice to get your input a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll put the ball back over the net.
That's it, man. Yeah. Okay, so staying in your lane as a PT. Should we stay in our lane?
Short answer, yes. The short answer is yes. And I don't think that's exclusive to PT. I think it's a sensible thing to do. It's not always the easiest thing to do. And that we can get into that a little bit. But yeah, the short answer is yes, stay in your lane, be good at the bits you're good at, and pass on the bits that you're not so good at.
I don't know if I agree.
Oh, here we go.
Some friction on this one. I think,
let's start with that.
Yeah, I think so. It's hard. It's hard, firstly, to stay in your lane. And the way I'm framing this, I've been thinking about this one, and this is the trickiest one. We started with the hardest, I think. This is the trickiest one. So people come to us with a goal, specific goal, okay? That is so inherently linked to their identity and who they want to be, which encompasses the whole life, right? That person's whole life, that whole identity. So to then say, kind of, we're going to be just the fitness bit or just the mobility bit, and we're not going to go into lots of detail around nutrition because we don't necessarily have the background. We're not talking about clinical. We're not necessarily talking about injuries that we don't understand. I think it's a nuance, isn't it? And I think you're right, but I think there's the flip side of the coin, and the way, yeah. So and therefore, my line of thinking that's kind of parallel or juxtaposed to yours, which is you kind of have to balance this dichotomy, a bit like leadership. Like you want the best for the organization and the individual, and sometimes that's a pull in different directions. I think it's kind of the same thing. You want the best for the individual, therefore you want to support them in by being a generalist, because they want information that's going to get them from point A, point B, and you somehow have to fill in those gaps. That's my general viewpoint, and therefore, I guess I'm coming at it from a different angle to you, and that's why I'm saying, actually, we can't stay in our lane if we want to deliver an ultimate result.
Yeah, I think what I like about what you said is this idea of being a generalist. And I think that is definitely probably something where I see myself, having been in the industry quite a long time and have had different personal interests, which I pursued and picked up different skill sets, different knowledge bases. And there's nothing wrong with being a generalist, but there are limits to that. And I think we have to respect the limits. If we take it to the extreme on one side, are we going to be diagnosing illnesses? No, of course not. I mean, that's not our job. It's not our role. It's not our background, not our training. I don't think I just think it's an unnecessary risk for you to take. Do you have some experience in, I mean, that's quite an extreme example, but I'm not a nutritionist, but I have a lot of, I believe that I have a lot of experience with nutrition, my personal nutrition, and sort of working with individuals and seeing a variation between that. But again, there is a limit to that. I wouldn't be prescribing specific treatments, but I could, but I would be comfortable talking to somebody in the context of maybe calories and sort of understanding where the limitations to my knowledge is and my responsibilities lie. And that might not always be clear, and it can be dynamic as well. But I think to err on the side of caution, you at the very least, you need to know what you're talking about.
Mm. Yeah, I do agree with that. So I think, yeah, so I think I can agree and having a slightly different kind of take on it, really. And I think what maybe we can agree on is you have to walk the line, don't you, as a PT? And I actually think it's a role that is hard to fulfill really well because of that. You have to walk the line through all these kind of minefields or through these different disciplines that people will assume you have a good foundational knowledge of, and you should. However, how much of that knowledge you pass on and how much you give as directive advice versus kind of a slightly different, more coaching conversation to say, my approach has been X, and I know that that's delivered results. What are you going to try? So, a kind of broader conversation as opposed to pin things down and being prescriptive.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe if I was to like lay out some of the catches, I think by not staying in your lane, some of the things that you can get yourself into hot water with. The first one is that I think that you can put yourself at risk if you could put somebody at an increased risk, either of injury, or you could delay them seeing somebody. Um, think about some of the worst stories you hear about. I don't know, crystal licking medicine. They call it medicine when it's not really, and they sort of delay people going to get things checked out, and then that every day is a day lost that they could be getting the correct treatment. So
Yeah.
I think there's that side of things. I think you put yourself at risk of talking about things that you don't know, and therefore you may get caught out. You may get caught out by somebody else in the room who you're talking to a client or you're talking to somebody, and somebody taps you on the shoulder and say, "What you're saying there is absolute nonsense," and then you lose integrity there. You lose integrity because you're trying to fill a gap that perhaps that person hasn't really asked you to fill. Just because they've made an assumption that you would know doesn't mean that you have to then fulfill that. I don't think. I also think that it's just unnecessary. I think you can develop skills that develop the skill set that you currently have to a level that gives you enough confidence to then pass people on to to the correct people. And then the fourth bit is just, yeah, I think it just challenges your integrity, because once you start stepping out of your lane, when do you stop? How far out of your lane are you willing to go? And how many steps is it before you're saying to somebody, oh, um, oh, yeah, passing comment on things that you just don't you don't know about. And like I said, the worst case scenario is that you could be denying somebody the opportunity to um, actually get the advice and the treatment that they need.
Yeah.
I'm talking like very much in a sort of clinical sense. That's where I see it going wrong. Um, I would like to say that I have stepped out of my lane. I have stepped out of my lane, and I think the more I've gone on in the industry, you get that kind of what I would call like a spidey sense. You almost like know when you're doing it, and it kind of makes you feel uncomfortable. And if you feel uncomfortable, that's an early warning sign that maybe you should just take a step back. For me,
Yeah. Right. Cool. Yeah. I think I do agree with, in principle, what you're saying. I think there's a big nuance to it, and uh, I think setting out your stall about how the conversation goes is probably the most important part from my perspective. And like I said, is like facilitating a coaching conversation where you don't have to have all the answers. That's not what a coach does.
sure.
And supporting people to make good, empowered decisions, which, to your point, is uh, finding and having the specific knowledge to answer the questions or deferring where appropriate. So, yeah, I think
I mean,
I think
saying that you don't know something is is fine and to be expected. Not you're not a fount of all knowledge.
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to. Well, I do want to pick at this a little bit more. Have you got a? Because obviously, you mentioned a couple of times now that we are coming at it from a slightly different way. I'm very adamant about it. You're looking at it from a perhaps more nuanced approach, and maybe I haven't completely understood what it is. So, have you got an example of when you've done that, when you've done it, stepped out of your lane, or you've done it successfully, or maybe even an example that that hasn't quite worked, just to help me and maybe
Um,
other people
I don't
understand a
know if
little
I
bit
don't know
better?
if I do have an example, but I tell you what the way I view the world, and we're getting like high level kind of like on my soapbox view of the world is
Get
like
on there, buddy.
so here we go. So 10 years of clinical practice. Okay. I've worked with clinicians from consultant level all the way through to advanced trauma nurses, people that are really highly skilled in very, very specific silos, and probably some of the best in the world at that. And I watched them operate. I really have. And I've watched them operate. And you're right in saying that they often have the answer of I don't know, because there's so much unknown out there. And I think woven into that, my own experience from health, fitness, my own challenges, my clients' challenges, my own clinical practice, is that what we don't know doesn't matter how much of an expert you are. What we don't know is always going to dwarf what we do know. So I think I don't think I'm directly challenging what you're saying around staying in your lane. I think there's that makes sense. I think with that frame of reference to say you can go into hospital and speak to the best expert on cardiology because you have a heart problem, there is still going to be more that he doesn't know about what's going on with you than he does know or she does know. But so with that frame of reference, then, like, I'm always going to fall back on the coaching conversation and supporting people to make empowered decisions without all the knowledge, whether that's me not having the knowledge or the knowledge in the space. What I would layer on top of that is like, I think, again, another philosophical soapbox point is I'm trying to empower people to be experts in their own health. And I think the model is a little bit broken, but especially when I talk about clinical practice, where we've got this doctor-patient relationship that's fundamentally broken. You go to someone to tell you how to fix your own health. Okay, and I think that's at the crux of a lot of the health problems that we're facing in the world now, is because we are outsourcing our responsibility for our own health, and that comes with massive implications, and that causes a lot of problems, and fundamentally doesn't work. That model is broken. It's been broken for 50, 60 years. So, I'm really impassioned to kind of like empower people. It's probably the easiest way to say it. I can't think of a better way to say it, to take responsibility. And this point, probably not from your perspective, but from my perspective, this point touches that nerve of no, we're going to figure this out. I'm going to support you through this. Yes, I'm not a dietitian. I don't know everything about your nutritional habits. I'm not a gut health expert. However, let's try something. Yes, if I feel appropriate, so there's probably a threshold, and my threshold is probably higher than yours because of my clinical background, maybe certain things, probably some other things that my threshold would be lower, then I would say, no, we're not going to have that. We're not going to attack that challenge without some additional support.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. What I'd like to add to that, I think, is that within that conversation, there are probably things that we can do as practitioners in that space to make sure that even though we remain at the forefront of that dialogue with whoever we're working with, that we stay within our comfort zone. So you're not diagnosing somebody with lung cancer, but at the same time you're saying, but we have there are other things that you could do in order to promote your health in a better way that we do feel comfortable dealing with. Like, you might have lung cancer, but you also eat exclusively Kentucky Fried Chicken. That is something that I feel comfortable dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I have a framework that I've sort of developed over the years in order to make sure that I feel comfortable and I don't get that spidey sense of like, oh God, I can hear myself talking too much here. And I am using concepts and words that I don't really understand. Anyway, so the way that I do it is that I think of the three pillars of health that I'm trying to improve or influence, which is sleep, movement, and food. And I think of those under the umbrella of them being physical. And as long as I can bring a conversation back to it being physical, about the physical, I feel comfortable as a practitioner. So if they want to talk about something wacky and quite niche, as long as I can bring it back in line with those three things, which I think that I have built up a decent level of experience with and a generalist level of experience with, then I that's how I kind of that's how I've kind of worked it over the years is, as long as I can have that conversation, if they want to talk about a specific diet that I've not really heard of or a specific nutrient that I've not really heard of, I think, okay, well, is it a supplement? Okay, well, where does supplements fit in my hierarchy of nutrition? And then I can go back through my notes and talk about it with confidence within the framework that I've set within that safe framework.
Yeah,
So
that makes a lot of sense. That's quite a powerful uh, statement, really, because I think that, I guess, again, pushes the ownership back to the individual, and also, I guess I would have a similar approach in terms of, yeah, great, this new wonder drug is going to cure your knee problem. Are we doing these three things first?
mm,
Um, Yeah, no.
yeah,
Okay. Well, and I talk about this 0 to 1. I don't know if you've heard about me talk about it, Matt. So getting guys from 0 to 1, one being a position when you can then start to fine tune things. But until you're at 1, forget about it. Like, just do the basics. Like, if you're not doing the fundamentals, forget about the advanced tactics. Like, yeah,
yeah.
and then bringing it back, and also what I liked about what you said before we move on is like the physical nature of things, getting people to move and do something, take action. I think that's very powerful, and in our sense, it's physically do something, and I think we've lost that a lot in this world. It's kind of like, let's read about something, let's speak to someone about something, whereas we're both practitioners of of physical science, basically, which is like, let's start moving our body, let's see how it feels, let's adapt as we move forward. And yeah, from a philosophical perspective, I think that speaks reams for sure.
I think that, all of these things exist on the spectrum. I've talked very much about like the sort of what I would consider the dangerous end when it goes really, really badly wrong. And you see this in lots of stuff. I read something about a sort of fly by night psychologist, and what in the end I think it was in Canada. She was ended up being sued because she was implanting like Inception, fake trauma, fake memories into people's minds by the line of questioning and she, but the more she did it, the more these people needed her. And then that fed into her own ego kind of thing. But these people were sort of basically just making the things that didn't happen, and they were estranging themselves from their families and stuff. And that's when it goes wrong. And I'm not saying that person set out to do that, like vindictively. But once it can get big very quickly and you take on a lot of responsibility, that it's sort of unnecessary when you just stick to, particularly where I am. I'm a personal trainer. Just stick to the meat and potatoes. Those three
It's
big
enough.
ones.
It's enough. It's
But
enough.
we
Yeah.
all have, I'm not doing and thinking in the same way as I was 16 years ago when I started. So I've picked up things, I've followed things, I've been curious about things. And with that, we're all susceptible to the Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know if people have heard about that, when you, through good intentions, take on a new topic, a new knowledge, and you read one book and all of a sudden it's all you can talk about. I mean, case in point, that book, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I think everybody read that, and then that's all that people were talking about. Everybody was a sleep expert, including myself. I did a, mobility course for 2 days, and all of a sudden you can put mobility expert at it, and then you have to sort of present yourself as an authority on it, but you really understand it. It's kind of unsettling. Um, all this stuff that you didn't know, and then then there's the drop, and it's that balance. I think what you were talking about maybe at the beginning is that balance between striking that balance between your personal confidence and knowing that there are always going to be more unknowns. But that is a well documented thing in the Dunning-Kruger effect. So you start off by feeling very confident, then you're right down at the bottom again, and then over the years you come back out of that. Um, to make
Yeah.
sure that you protect yourself on that journey, with a framework like I have, for example, in my world, which is bring it back to the physical and listen to that spidey sense. And if you talking in a language, this is another one I use. If I'm talking in a language where a 5-year-old couldn't understand it or a child couldn't understand it, it normally means I'm either showing off or I'm out of my depth or I've missed the point because I don't fully understand it. So I'm having to use big words and confusing concepts. And that would be that would be the softer side, but another red flag for me. And that gives me that same sort of feeling in my stomach sometimes.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. What's the takeaway for guys and girls trying to figure this out, like figure out their fitness journey? What's the takeaway for them?
Remember that it's okay not to have all the answers. And although you're in a position of authority, it shows a damn sight more integrity to say, I don't know, but this person might, and we could maybe work together. And that would be the main takeaway. You're not supposed to have all the answers. That doesn't mean that you should stop learning and that you should stop figuring out where that line and boundary is, but certainly err on the side of caution. That's what I would say.
Not for the professional though, from a person that just wants to get fitter, wants to get stronger.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I mean, I would say that in terms of my own personal health, the biggest jumps that I've made of when I've sought out help. So I've, created a little bit of momentum or desire through, often, let's be honest, it's sometimes being a bit unhappy with the way that we feel about our health. And then I've learned that actually you can probably speed up the process by going to the appropriate or starting a conversation with the appropriate professional and just cutting out some of that. Yeah, reducing the lag time between you getting the result that you actually desire. All right. I think it's perfectly okay to struggle a little bit and to back yourself to solve it, but going to a professional would be a good thing. And that would be an understanding of that you don't have the knowledge to stay in your lane, but then to go and ask outside of that in order for you to get towards that goal quicker.
Yeah, I think I'd echo the same in terms of like getting an external person to give you an objective view. I think that's probably the first step that I would encourage people to do, without trying to sell coaching on the podcast. But again,
That's what we're here for.
what I would say, don't do. Okay, maybe it's a better approach, but I would say don't do this. don't think that you need to speak to the expert, question what they're saying, speak to another expert, question what they're saying, and speak to another expert, question what they're saying, and come up with a litany of excuses why you're not able to move forward. And the reason I say that is because that's what I see happening.
I know somebody like this. And that's just, you're looking for somebody just to confirm what it is that you thought in the first place. And you just go from next to next to next. And you can do that because because like you said, there are more unknowns than knowns. And therefore you always have that to fall back on. So if it's stopping you from action.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. There you go. Cool.